Welcome to Leading with Curiosity. Command and control leadership is dead. We interview leaders, entrepreneurs, and executive coaches challenging old paradigms and fostering cutting-edge leadership. Here's your host, certified executive coach, Nate Leslie.
Hey listeners, my guest today started reading one leadership and management book a week in 1998. Over 1,100 leadership books later, Todd Churches is like a management and leadership thought leader encyclopedia. I love this conversation. 30 minutes went by like that. I wish I could go longer. I know I'm going to have him on Leading with Curiosity again. We explore the difference between management and leadership and why they are both absolutely critical. What makes a great leadership facilitation experience. And we explore his new book, Visual Thinking, really the power of helping people see what you're trying to say. With no further ado, I welcome Todd Churches to the podcast, executive coach, leadership development trainer, thought leader, and professor of leadership at both NYU and Columbia University in New York City. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did recording it. Todd Churches, welcome to Leading with Curiosity.
Nathan, thanks for having me.
Something that caught my attention where former guest Rob Salafia mentioned about you, and he said, you need to talk to Todd. It was the volume of books on leadership that you have read, and I need to ask you about that right off the hop.
Sure. I always say it's not about quantity, but quality, right? But yes, it's, I got addicted to business books way back in 1998 when I was working for a management training company, and they hired me to revamp their mini MBA. So even though I had been a manager, I had never studied management or leadership. So once I realized that, there's actually millions of books on the subject, I got hooked, and I realized why so many of my bosses, so I don't know if you checked the Guinness Book of World Records recently, but I'm in there for having had the most bad bosses of anyone who's ever set foot on this planet. So that's my main claim to fame. But once I started reading management and leadership, my personal mission statement became making the world a better place, one leader at a time. And to me, everyone is a leader in one way or another. So I start with that foundation and I go from there.
I love how our personal mission statements guide so much of what we do, and yours making the world a better place, one leader at a time. Tell us a bit more about the work that you're doing. I'm a former New York City guy. I got to live there a few years, so that caught my attention that you're professor at NYU and Columbia. Tell us about your roles there.
Sure. Long story short, I started out in the entertainment industry. My dream was to work in television, and I did work in advertising for a year in New York, and I lived in LA for 10 years working for a variety of companies, including Disney and CBS, developing TV shows. After a while, mainly in administrative type positions, so I couldn't crack that ceiling to get into a management leadership role. I think the reason is because I was too introverted. I always thought my work would speak for itself, but I learned very quickly that you have to speak for yourself, right? So I basically left television figuring I could always go back into it, and I didn't. Just like Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken, right? You go down one path and you think, oh, I could always come back, but the road takes you down a completely different path, which led me to management leadership development, which is what I've been doing ever since. So that's kind of the path I took. And I always, even though I talk loud and fast because I'm a New Yorker, I'm an extreme introvert. I always say I'm a 3Bs guy by nature. I'm a back of the room, behind the scenes bookworm. That is who I am. So everything I do beyond that is pushing myself well out of my comfort zone. So I took some public speaking courses, and over the years, I got better at it. And I was always behind the scenes, but one time we were doing a management leadership training down at a resort location for a group of CEOs, and the trainer didn't show up. He got sick and missed his flight. And I called back to the office in New York and I said, what do I do? And they said, well, we're either going to have to cancel the course and refund everyone their money and face the humiliation, or you do it, right? So I knew the content, and I just got up there and I did it. And it turned out I wasn't that terrible at it, and I wasn't as terrified of it as I thought I would be, and I actually enjoyed it. So I was actually disappointed the next day when the trainer actually showed up for day 2 of 3. So, but having done that, that kind of got me hooked, and then eventually I became a trainer, a coach, and now I teach leadership at NYU and Columbia. and I'm a TEDx speaker, and I speak on podcasts like this. So somehow I got past that, over that hump, and now I do this for a living.
Oh, there's so much I want to dig deeper into to what you just said. And many people think, the definition of an introvert or extrovert is how much you like to talk, but it's really about where you get your energy. And what I actually heard you say was, behind the scenes, behind the room, reading, bookworm, that gives you that capacity to read your over 1,000 books and thrive in that moment. Would you say that's where you get your energy from?
Yeah, I would say 80-20 ratio of 80% of my time doing solitary thinking, designing, planning, producing, and then 20% of my time in front of people, in front of the room, and doing that kind of stuff. During certain times of the year, like during the semester for NYU and Columbia, I'm out in front a lot more often. So maybe it's like 60-40. But just as you said, a lot of people think introverts are shy or they're scared of people. It's not that. It's just that having to put myself out there that much gets me very drained and exhausted, while reading gets me energized, right? Designing, creating PowerPoint slides, coming up with creative ideas, that's what energizes me. So, and I know other people who are the exact opposite ratio, right? They want to be out there in the world. So for people during the pandemic, like me, we were able to, I think, to tolerate it better because we're used to, and we actually thrive on more solitary time, as opposed to the people who need to be out there, who are jumping out of their skin, wanting to get back out there into the world again. So it's interesting, different strokes for different folks, right?
Yeah. In this leadership development space, many of us who are doing one-on-one executive coaching or leadership facilitation with groups, you do make your money being present. And you just described that 80-20. And how do you draw that line to create that space for yourself to do your best thinking in your design work?
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't found anyone who's willing to pay me per book for reading their book. So I mean, I would be a multimillionaire if that was the case. So you do need to be out there with clients and working with people. One good thing is executive coaching can be done just as efficiently and effectively online via Zoom as we're doing right now. It is the in-person leadership training and the speaking engagements and the team building offsites that I used to do a lot of. Those are the things that kind of went away during the pandemic and are just now starting to pick up again. I just did my first in-person 2-day leadership training of a client in New York last Thursday and Friday. It went really well. Even though people were wearing masks, we had some people in the room, other people remotely dialing in. So there was that logistical complexity. But again, we're moving back to that direction of being out there again.
My last episode, I just interviewed my own father who does this type of work as well, and just flew back to Switzerland to do his first in-person, had people live, had people calling in virtually. Yeah. That's the new world of leadership development, I think, too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a test of our flexibility, agility. It's not going to be as seamless and perfect because of all the technology and all the logistical complexities that are involved. Hopefully the clients realize that. If they expect perfection when you have all these moving pieces, it's challenging. So, but you do the best you can, and hopefully everyone, realizes, let's make the best of this together, right? Let's collaborate to make this, because it's not, even when I do programs in person, it's not me speaking the whole time. It's interactive. My rule of 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 is the success of any program is 1/3 the content, 1/3 my facilitation and presentation, and 1/3 the contributions of the people in the room. So that is my 100% formula for success that I use in my NYU and Columbia classes and with my clients. So the key is to get that 1/3 out of our participants, and that adds the greatest value because they're not only learning, but they're teaching one another. So that's an important factor.
That's such a simple, talking about visual leadership and visual coaching, that is such a simple way for someone to see the experience of leadership development and facilitation that maybe is wondering what they're about to get into. Yeah. Oh, am I going to go listen to this guy Todd for 3 days?
Right.
You and I know that that's not what's going to happen, but that I'm going to borrow that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Sure.
I really
Anytime.
like that.
Borrow it, steal it, whatever you want to do.
Actually, that's a good point. As we develop our own voice, as you've done with your new book, Visual Leadership, which we will get to, and you spend time designing and thinking, how do you most eloquently and respectfully take content and knowledge from others, from the 1,100 books you've read, and give it your own voice in a way that's authentic and well accepted?
Yeah, there's a book, right? If you're watching this on video, you can see this book on the shelf right behind me called Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. So there's very few original ideas out there, unless you're like Peter Drucker, the father of management. Almost everything is derivative in some way. There's always a new metaphor, a new approach. Here's the 5 tips for this. And then someone says, here's the 7 tips. They add 2 more. So there's a saying in the training business. I was just telling someone the other day, the first time you use something, you say, oh, I got this from so-and-so. The second time you say, I don't remember where I got this. And the third time is, I made this up. Right. So we're kidding around with that, but often, I don't know if you've experienced that. Sometimes you forget, wait, did I come up with that? I know 20 consultants who all claim to have invented SMART goals, right? Or VUCA or whatever. So there are ideas out there floating in the universe. Someone had to have originated it. And I try to be respectful of giving credit where credit is due. In my book, I have a list of my favorite models in the back, but all of the content in the book is all my own original models. So at one point I was going to incorporate Maslow's hierarchy of needs and SWOT and certain other well-known models, but I decided I had so many of my own models and frameworks, I decided to just focus on those in the book. But there's so many out there, and I think that's the key is give credit where credit's due. But if a model doesn't work for you, modify it, adapt it. There's a saying by a English philosopher, George Box, who said that all models are wrong, but some models are useful. And I love that quote, because models are a way to wrap our heads around reality, but there's always some inaccuracy. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but if you could use it for something to see something more clearly or solve a problem, then it served its purpose, right? I love that philosophy.
I love that too. And I will put links to the blog and the notes in this podcast to Steal Like an Artist and of course to Visual Leadership. That's gold. And the one version between I got this from so-and-so, I'm not sure where I got this, and I made this up.
Right.
The I made this up one gets really old really fast. If you go around telling everybody I made this up, it's interesting enough for you to say it. Yeah. It doesn't need your ego's name bar or label all over it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, where this happens a lot with famous quotes that people never said. Like there's a lot of quotes that people, as Thomas Edison said, or as Albert Einstein once said, I always say, unless there's documentation, I always say, as Einstein is often quoted as having said, or I kind of cushion it or frame it in that way, because a lot of quotes sound great, but we don't always know the original source. So I always am very cautious about that, because, especially in the world of academia, you want to be accurate and respectful and quote your sources. So if there's any doubt about if someone said something or who said it, I'll say, here's a quote commonly attributed to Abe Lincoln or Confucius or whatever.
Actually, to expose a bit of an insecurity that I had that I'm catching myself getting over is that if the idea is good enough, then the idea has legs. And I used to feel like if I shared it, I always needed to say where I heard it. Mm-hmm. And while that might add some color once in a while and is absolutely appropriate if you're really, there's a difference between borrowing a concept and stealing a quote. Just that idea that if it's powerful enough, just say it. And of course, if someone wants the source, help them dig it up, right?
Yeah, you can always look these things up, right? There's a site called Quote Investigator that exists just to investigate who said what, right? And a lot of times people attribute quotes to famous people because it gives it more weight. But a lot of famous quotes were said by people who are unknown, right? But it gives them more weight if you say it was said by Mark Twain or Oscar Wilde, right? So I think that's a key thing. But you make a good point. If something's useful and it's going to help to solve a problem or address an issue, then you could use it. Even sometimes we'll say, oh, I can't remember who said it, so I won't use it. Just use it. Like you said, you can always look it up later, And what you said also reminds me of, I don't know if you want to get into this discussion, which often comes up with coaches, is the distinctions between coaching, training, and consulting. Like some coaches are pure coaching. Like I only do coaching, but I believe in all 3 of those things because I will say to my client, I'm putting on my consulting hat or I'm putting on my training hat for a second in a coaching session. But I think we're actually doing our clients a disservice if we're not doing anything possible that will help them address their issue. But I know some coaches are very, puritanical in some ways or fundamental about, coaching is coaching and do not even go down the path of training or consulting. Now, I don't go down the path of therapy because I know that is, that's, a separate area. But anyway, that's a topic that often comes up when talking about coaching.
It does. It does. And in my context, it was if I can ask this question in 7 words instead of 21 words, then Nate, do it in 7.
Right.
You've read 1,100 books on leadership. You know something in the moment that could be extremely valuable. And if you balance the consultant with the coach, share it as an offering and let them accept it or reject it. If they love it, explore it more with some coaching questions. If it means nothing to them, we move on. We don't insist that they learn it, right?
Exactly. Right. We're not trying to force our agenda on someone. We're throwing
Yeah.
something out there, seeing if it resonates. And if not, like you said, move on to something else, because there's always something else out there if that one particular book or model or quote doesn't resonate with the person.
And the things that we know, the wisdom we have, the experiences that we've had become our signature presence as a coach. And just like any strength, overused or pushed too far starts to work against us. And okay, here it comes again with Todd. He's going to give me 1,000 leadership quotes today. It's not how you implement it. The art of it is doing it at just the right moment that it makes all the difference.
Yeah, I have a tendency to take a more is more approach as opposed to a less is more approach. But I'm working on it. We're all works in progress, right? So if someone says, "Oh, what's one good book I should read on this?" I'll say, "Here's 20." Right? That doesn't help, right? So I need to force myself to say, "Here's 3," and of these, 1, 2, and 3 are my top 3 recommendations. So, but again, we're all working on things. But that's my tendency because I have so much to say, and that's. You can tell I talk really fast, not only because I'm a New Yorker, but I have a lot to say in very little time. So, but I think sometimes we have to hit the pause button, slow it down, and then also, especially as a coach, do more listening than talking. So that's a big challenge, especially if we're passionate and excited and have so much to share.
Yeah. On toddchurches.com, which is your website, I actually saw that this morning, which was here's the 20 books you need that will change your life or shift your leadership.
Yeah, my download is 52 books. So yes, but
that's like me. No one can ask me like, what's your favorite movie? Like, well, what genre? Like, what are we talking? Is this Friday night? Is it Sunday afternoon? Am I with my wife? Am I by myself? Like, what's
Well, one of the things I always say, and I say this to my students, I say, if you want to always have the right answer to any question I ask in my class, the answer is it depends. Right? Now you get paid the big bucks if you could figure out what it depends on, but it depends, just like you said, it depends. Is this a date movie, or if you're watching something to get in the mood for Halloween, right? So it depends on what's in any situation. And that's what makes it challenging is everything's situational and personal. So there's no one size fits all solution, which is also what makes it fun, trying to figure out what's going to help solve a problem.
Which is why we need that 80-20, because we need time to sift through all these exciting adventures if we're lifelong learners, which I have a feeling you and I both are.
Yes, definitely.
When I mentioned to a few friends, I'm interviewing a professor from NYU in Columbia, the first thing that comes to mind is, what's he teaching and to whom? Let's start with to whom. Who are your students?
Sure. At NYU, I teach in the NYU School of Professional Studies in the Division of Programs and Business in the Human Capital Management Master's Program. So I'm teaching graduate students who are getting their master's in human resources. So these are people who may be HR generalists or going into coaching or comp and benefits or any of those areas, diversity, inclusion, belonging. So these are all people getting their degrees in human resources. At Columbia, I've taught in a variety of different programs, and every spring I teach a very fun course. I teach 4 sessions of a 14-session course, Leadership for Broadway Stage Managers, which is a lot of fun because these are all people. As a stage manager, you run the show, but you have very little power and authority. So a lot of it has to do with leading through influence and relationships. So I help to train stage managers who have to work with cast and crew and directors and producers. How do you communicate? How do you build collaboration? And how do you so that's what I do. So I get to use a lot of my Shakespeare background and Broadway theater, show tunes and stuff I sprinkle into the course. So that's a lot of fun and a little different than the HR audience, which is also interactive and fun, but in a different way.
Yeah, that caught my attention because the stage managers, again, a great visual, an opportunity for coaching because by definition, they do need to give up some control to the creatives or the people that they work with. And coaching is a great position where we are by definition giving up control versus a lecture or a command and control leadership, just sending everybody where they need to go. So if you could just describe to me a challenge maybe that a stage manager kind of faces before they before they know what they now know, and just how they can show up differently once having this education.
Yeah, I think as with a lot of jobs, there's two components. There's the technical proficiency, like how do I run a show, right? How do I operate the panel and the lighting and all the technical stuff, the functional stuff. And the other side is the soft skills, for lack of a better word, the soft skills side. How do I maintain relationships? How do I gain willing cooperation? How do I both manage as in a stage manager, but I also need to be a leader in terms of inspiring people, making a vision become a reality. So you actually need both. And I do a lot of work in all my classes and workshops is the John Kotter Harvard Business School distinctions between managing and leading. We need to do both. Neither one's better or worse. The management side, you manage processes, you lead people, right? So that's the foundation. So when are you wearing your management hat and when are you wearing your leadership hat? And you need to be able to go back and forth, weave back and forth seamlessly based on the scenario you're facing and the people that you're interacting with. That's one of the common themes.
To manage process and to lead people.
Right. So when you're doing budgeting and scheduling and all the mechanical stuff, those are all management functions. And the outcome of management is process, order, stability, structure. It's about execution. On the leadership side of the table, and this is John Kotter 101, is the management leads to stability, leadership leads to change. Right. So that's the paradox. You're trying to both maintain stability and execute in the present while also leading change for the future. And that applies to coaching too, right? We're helping a coaching client deal with their present realities, but we're also trying to set them up for success in the future. And sometimes our short-term and our long-term goals are in odds with one another. In fact, Dory Clark's new book is called The Long Game: How to Do Short-Term Thinking in the Long-Term World, right? So I'm just in the middle of reading it right now. And I don't know if you know Dory Clark, but she's one of the top thought leaders out there in all areas, marketing, management, leadership, et cetera. In fact, a number of her books are right over my head here. But I think that's the challenge, whether you're working with an organization, a team, or a person, you're juggling, what do I need to do today? And how do I set myself up for success in the future, right? Yeah. So it's today, the past, present, and future are always present in everything we do.
So many people who have been hired into leadership roles find themselves calling themselves a manager and think do, moving pieces around the board, physically moving pieces around the board. And that concept of processes, creating that stability, that environment, and the awakening and the learning that can happen through leadership development training, which so many leaders have been hired into roles and don't have, right? Just that awareness of the delineation when time to lead and time to manage is powerful.
Yeah, I tend to compare and contrast the two. So one of my sayings is that managers try to get the most out of people, leaders try to get the best out of them, right? So just that one distinction between most and best, what does that mean? Managers focus on the position, leaders focus on the person in the position, right? One of the metaphors I use is playing chess versus checkers, right? Managers are playing checkers. You're moving the pieces around. It's a lot less strategic. The pieces are interchangeable. In chess, each piece is good at something else and has a different function, right? The nook or the rook or the knight or the queen. Each one has a different strength, skill set. So as a leader, you need to think more strategically, a number of steps ahead, and think of your people more as chess pieces than as checkers pieces. So just one example of using a visual metaphor to explain the distinctions, very subtle distinctions, but important distinctions between managers and leaders. And we're talking about management and leadership as functions, not as people, right? We're not saying, Nate, you're a manager and I'm a leader. We're saying everyone needs to both manage and lead our own lives, as well as our teams and our organizations.
Leadership is a choice, not a position.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And the expression, I was just a pawn, as someone thinks back to the bad boss they had and the boss that they quit, not the job that they quit, but that chess analogy. I have more to offer than just the functions of a pawn.
Definitely right. That is definitely right.
We should transition into, we've used a number of metaphors already. You've given some great visual examples, but the journey that you've been on that culminated in that book over your shoulder there, Visual Leadership. Tell us about it.
Sure. I mean, after reading all the hundreds of books that I've read, people kept saying, and I was always quoting them, and people kept saying to me, when are you going to write your own book, right? So it was always one of these days. And for years, I started accumulating content and models and writing blog posts. And when I sat down to write my book, I literally had 2,000 pages of content to sort through to put into some kind of book format. The idea of visual leadership, and if you look at the word, it's a single word with one single shared capital L. So visual leadership, which is actually a trademark now, I got it approved by the US Patents Office, represents the fact that who you are and how you lead is inseparable from the lens through which you see the world, right? So if you talk about leadership, having a leadership vision or being a visionary leader, it's about seeing, right? It's about seeing possibilities and seeing a future state that's different from and better than the current reality. Our vision of the future has a lot to do with our experiences from the past, right? So there is that continuous connection between past, present, and future. And I do talk about that in my TED Talk, where I use the image of the car and the fact that we're on this journey together. The windshield represents the future, the rearview mirror represents the past, and the dashboard represents the present and how you measure success, right? So that's just one visual metaphor that you're not looking at it, but I just described it. So hopefully you saw that in your mind's eye. And that's the idea behind visual leadership, is how do you get people to see what you're saying? How do you make a vision a reality? And one of my concepts of flipping the eye is how do we turn that eye on ourselves and look inwardly at our biases, assumptions, belief systems, which are based on our life experiences, and realize that other people see the world differently than we do. And that's what the rainbow eye on the cover represents: diversity and inclusion, as well as innovation and creativity, and the fact that we have to use all the colors of the rainbow to help paint a picture of a better future.
That's really powerful. Gosh, where do I want to go? So many places when I listen to you speak, insert coaching here as extremely valuable, function to explore those experiences in my past that are shaping my paradigm right now, and therefore influencing when I look out the windshield. What am I seeing? Am I seeing the beautiful horizon? Am I seeing the world going beneath the tires at 100 miles an hour? And so often people don't take the moment to address the blind spots that they don't know exist because they are blind spots.
Exactly. Yeah. What are you seeing? But also what are you missing? Right? What are you not seeing? Right? So our paradigms are like the lens through which we see the world. So if we have blinders on, and if we see things through a different, we all see things from our own perspective, right? Our upbringing, our culture, our teaching, our training, where we live. Like, you may see something from a different perspective in Vancouver, and I see it as a New Yorker, right? Although you've been to New York, and I've been to Whistler, and I've never got to spend any time in Vancouver, but I once facilitated a 5-day leadership program up in Whistler, and it was so amazingly beautiful up there. And it took like drive up the coast from Vancouver, which I'll never forget. So at sunrise, I landed and it was coming in. That was an amazingly beautiful life experience. Visually, it's locked in my head. And because I hadn't thought about Vancouver or Whistler in many years, and that was probably 20 years ago, but it's amazing how it comes back to you almost as if you're seeing it with your physical eye, but you're seeing it in your mind's eye. And Shakespeare coined the term to see something in your mind's eye when he saw the ghost of his father. When Hamlet saw the ghost of his father, he didn't know if it was an apparition or a figment of his imagination. He said, I think I see my father in my mind's eye. So that's an interesting thing, is how do you get someone to see something in their mind's eye? How do you get that idea out of your head and into theirs? And there's always going to be some distortion. It's kind of like when you read a novel and then you see the movie version, how it doesn't match up exactly, because when you were reading it, you had a certain picture. It's the same thing when we're coaching someone. How do we, as a coach, get someone to share a story with us and paint a picture of their situation so that we can see it, so we can help them find solutions through our use of questioning and listening?
Fantastic. I know one thing for sure, that I would love to have you back on Leading with Curiosity at another time. What would you like readers of your book to have when they hit the last page?
That's a great question that hadn't been asked before. That's I would say, hopefully, to start to see things and notice things that they hadn't noticed or thought about before. Looking at things just like as if you got a brand new pair of glasses, that's a new prescription. It's like, wow, everything's so clear now. hopefully you'll start to see things that you hadn't noticed or thought about. Sometimes in life, we need to look at the world through a telescope and sometimes through a microscope, right? Sometimes we look out into the distance and sometimes we put our heads down and look down into the details. So the ability to use these metaphorical ways of thinking, sometimes a magnifying glass, sometimes we look through a prism or a kaleidoscope, right? So the metaphor of seeing is a way to change your reality. If you change what you see, you could change the way you frame problems, solutions. And I end my TED Talk with the quote from Marcel Proust, who said that the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new lands, but in seeing with new eyes. So hopefully everyone will leave here listening to this today and reading my book, starting to see some things with new eyes and see what's possible that maybe they hadn't thought about before.
Todd Churches, thank you for your time. Todd can be found at toddchurches.com, his new book, Visual Leadership. I'll be linking to both in our show notes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Leading with Curiosity. Please share, follow, and rate the show so that other leaders can make positive change in the world. Connect with Nate at nateleslie.ca. And remember, the brain behaves very differently when encouraged to think rather than told to listen.